We all know Lamar Jackson is extremely hungry for a Super Bowl win, and he's showing that he is locked in more than ever and ready to rewrite the Baltimore Ravens' recent playoff history. All that and more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your show. So be sure to subscribe, follow along if you are here with us on YouTube, like the video. It means a lot, and you can share the show with a friend, with a family member if they want daily Ravens coverage 5 days a week, news, analysis, updates. We have it here for them. Locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with personal supply of 5 antibiotics to treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE medical.com. We're in the lull of the bye week here. It is a midweek edition of Locked On Ravens. It kind of feels like it's weird, like, what day is it today? What day is it today? Just looking forward to the Ravens getting back out there on the field, but of course, very happy they have the bye. Now, we did get some bye week content here from Lamar Jackson, and we know he's hungry for a Super Bowl. We know he's locked in, right? There's no questions about that, no ifs, ands, or buts. But on the Let's Go podcast, and Tom Brady was the big guy on that, also Larry Fitzgerald and whatnot. But Lamar Jackson went on there, Jim Gray also, but Lamar Jackson went on there and talked with Tom Brady. And the big thing with Lamar is we know how much respect he has for Tom Brady. It's been shown over the course of his career. And obviously Tom has grown a lot of respect for Lamar. And Lamar was just showing again how locked in he is. And it's not just that as well. I want to kind of dive into how he's shown over the course of the entire season he's locked in, but go more in depth on some of these quotes because Lamar gave some good ones 1,000% here. And he talked about a chip on his shoulder. I mean, for Lamar, part of this whole thing with him is, he's motivated. He's a motivated guy, super, super competitive. And when he talked about having this chip on his shoulder, he's not going to, he still has it because he wants to win the Super Bowl, right? Because he's on the verge of potentially winning the second MVP, but the MVP is not what he cares about, right? He says he definitely still has a chip on his shoulder. He doesn't think he's accomplished what he wants to yet. So that's why the chip is still on his shoulder. And, Jim Gray asked, well, what do you want to accomplish? And he says, the Super Bowl. That's the accolade that he really wants. And he said he's been chasing it for a long time, but it's not just professionally. High school, college, winning state championship, national championship. He didn't win those. And since he didn't complete those, it's like, well, he wants to be a champion. He wants to be a champion. And I guess, quote unquote chip, like championship on the shoulder there. Lamar's so hungry for it. And we know he's hungry for it. And he has motivation. We know that we've seen the clips of him, 75-yard touchdown to Zay Flowers, doesn't care. Stay locked in, stay in the moment. And that's the type of leader championship teams have to have. And it comes in many different ways, shapes, and forms. Lamar, his leadership style takes on a different leadership style than Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Tua or any of those guys, right? But I think Lamar's leadership style is what this team needs right now. And you pair that with a guy like Roquan Smith, we can tell. Now, I know it, I think everybody listening, watching knows it. Lamar is ready to rewrite that playoff history. And I think it's really, really cool because we knew that he wanted to win before, but I think as he's grown as a player in the NFL, as a person, we've kind of seen the maturation process of him, which has been awesome. And I think it was really cool for Lamar also just to be on the show with Tom Brady. I mentioned that respect, and Brady kind of heaped a ton of praise on Lamar. And this goes back, for those who don't know about the Brady-Lamar connection, goes back a while now, but the one that I think people will remember is when Tom Brady retired, he put up a picture of him and Lamar shaking hands, and he said, "You're next," to Lamar. Now, the grammar was not great. He said "your," should be obviously Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, but he spelled it Y-O-U-R. Regardless of grammar, though, it meant a lot to Lamar. And for him, he said over the course of his career, he wants to be like Brady, bring multiple Super Bowls back. And there was a funny interaction with Ray Lewis. Maybe I'll resurface it on Twitter today or tomorrow. But he says, he wants to be the Brady. He wants to be the Brady. And Tom Brady told him the first time he ever really noticed Lamar was in high school, that high school highlight, the Vine one, where I don't think a lot of people knew it was Lamar Jackson, but it was him down in South Florida, juking out the guy, walking into the end zone. And Tom Brady said, quote, now you're doing that at the highest level. You're the reason why people watch the NFL. And you see Lamar in the clip get all giddy and everything. And it meant a lot from him. He said that means a lot coming from you. But other than that, a couple of other quotes that Lamar had. One sticks out to me in particular. And he's really excited for the playoffs. And we know that. And he said on the Let's Go podcast, quote, this year is different. The playoff record or whatever, people are always going to be talking about that. It's going to be different. I'm really excited, to be honest with you, to be in the postseason again and healthy. We know the recent playoff history with this team. We know it's been disappointing. Since 2012, 2013, the Ravens have not been back to the AFC Championship. Obviously, the 2012-2013 year, they won the Super Bowl. Haven't been back to the AFC Championship in that long. It's been a bunch of wild card exit disappointments, divisional round exit disappointments, not making the playoff disappointments. In Lamar's playoff history over the course of his first 5 years in the league, 2018, rookie year, Chargers wild card loss, comes in the middle of the season for Joe Flacco. All right, it's fine. 2019 obviously is the major disappointment against Tennessee after going 14-2, losing the divisional round there. 2020, they do end up beating Tennessee in the revenge game, but then losing to Buffalo. But then you have 2021, where the Ravens don't make the playoffs even. 2022, the Ravens losing the wild card round with Tyler Huntley, and that was to Cincinnati. In both those games, 2021 and 2022, well, the one in 2022 didn't feature Lamar. 2021 obviously didn't feature him either because the Ravens didn't make the playoffs. So Lamar was injured the back half of both of those seasons. You can tell that he has a chip on his shoulder. Not that he lets the outside noise flood in, doesn't really do that. That's not who Lamar is. But he's ready, and I think this is kind of what he strives for, where there are playoff risers and there are playoff droppers. You see it across every single sport in the world, right? People sometimes rise to the occasion. Sometimes people shrink in those moments when the bright lights are on. If you look at just the pure box score and record stats, Lamar's 1-3 in the playoffs, and the Ravens, they barely won with Lamar in the playoffs. That Tennessee game in 2019, I'm not putting that all on Lamar, right? He had all those drops in that game. Tennessee kind of got out on him on offense, and I'm not saying, Lamar is absolutely not the reason, and there's no fault in Lamar here. Obviously, Lamar carries a lot of that fault, a lot of that blame. I'm not trying to absolve him from any and all wrongdoing there. He's done plenty, but I'm not trying to blame it all on him. I think that's honestly quite unfair, and I think this is the year we're going to see it. He has the best weapons around him we've seen. He's dialed in, he's locked in, he's improved every single season. We haven't seen him in a playoff setting since that Buffalo loss. And even that game, he exited early with an injury because the centers couldn't snap the ball right. So I'm hoping that it will be different this time around. Lamar certainly, I think, feels that way. And look, if Lamar feels that way, I'm going to trust him. I'll put my trust in him there. But the quote that I think got the most people's attention was his playoff soundtrack. I put that out last night. He said he's been listening to the old Lil Wayne, like the Carter 2 in 2004 Lil Wayne. And he said it brings him back to his first year playing football, and it's been playing out pretty well, kind of that mentality he had as a kid when he first was playing football. So you know what? If Lil Wayne can kind of be a catalyst of this Ravens Super Bowl run, if it happens, I'm all for it. And then there was also a quote on Odell that he had, which was really cool because Odell, there's been a lot of controversy on that signing. Was it good? Was it not? But Lamar said, quote, just his energy, just him being himself. He loves making everybody laugh. He's still Odell Beckham, no doubt in my mind. I'm going to give him a shot. And he always makes a great catch or makes something happen for us. Odell's been worth the money. He's been worth the money. Now, the stats won't tell you that, but it goes beyond the box score. Lamar wanted a guy like Odell. He wanted a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. Baltimore brought him Odell. Odell's been great for the culture, great for the vibes, great for the young guys as a veteran. And I think Lamar also benefited from having Odell in the locker room and Odell around him. So this is a player in Lamar that I honestly, and this might be bold, I don't know, but I'll say it. I don't think there's a player in this league that wants to win the Super Bowl right now more than Lamar Jackson. I just don't. He's been dialed in all season. The way he talks, the way he carries himself, it's one game at a time for him. This team has kind of picked up on that mentality too. And Cam Newton had a bunch of really interesting quotes, and one that really stuck out and gained some traction about how this team goes as Lamar goes, and the city honestly goes as Lamar goes. So Lamar's ready. The playoff history recently for Baltimore has not been fun. We've had conversations about, is John Harbaugh still the guy? What do they have to do? They've gotten rid of both coordinators, 2 coordinators gone in 2 years. But this offense has found its stride with Lamar. The defense is playing at an all-time level. And Lamar's motivated. He's locked in, and that's the word people use. It's the phrase people use. He is locked in, and look, I don't blame him, because you look at Lamar being laser focused and, a guy that is still able to have fun, but you don't see him laughing as much on the sideline. See him having fun, rooting for his guys, right? That's never going to go away. But at the end of the day, we know what Lamar's goal is, and that's not to have another great regular season and see it fizzle out. It's obviously to see that thing all the way through and rewrite that chapter of Baltimore Ravens history. And that history's there, right? It's not going to go away, but you can kind of wash all that away. The saying is winning cures everything. The Ravens won the Super Bowl. That'll definitely cure a lot in Baltimore. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we'll continue talking about Lamar, look at some of the coaching updates that happened as well with some of the Ravens' assistants. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. And I know that we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk a minute about actually preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That's pretty scary. And I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than someone I cared about getting sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medication that they needed. Thankfully, it'll be okay, though, because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat long lists of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. And this stuff can happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON and get $20 off your order. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you're looking for daily fantasy sports, look no further than PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun. So many have had them up to 25 times their money this football season. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less than the projected stats, and place your entry. The basketball season also is in full swing here. You can now pick on projections across football and basketball from the Specials League created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce, you can pick those guys. The 10.5 combo with 3-pointers made plus receptions. If you want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like Brad McMillan, community Andrew Schultz, you can now find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries of some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. PrizePicks even offers reboot policies or entry stay and play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Wednesday. Appreciate you taking some time listening to this episode here today. The Ravens have plenty of time on their hands as they're going to have their bye week. And Lamar Jackson, regardless, he is locked in. The Ravens, I believe John Harbaugh said it, they'll be practicing today, tomorrow, and Friday. I think a stadium practice is involved in that too. So a little bit of a shift from what we saw in 2019 when they had the bye as the 1 seed. And I think it's a very welcome shift considering how that season went. But Cam Newton, I kind of teased that at the end of the first segment on his podcast. He was talking a little bit about what was going on. It was the 4th and 1 podcast, and he was talking about the clip Lamar after the Miami game about how that's another thing. Evan Washburn interview on CBS saying he's locked in, and Cam Newton said, man, that man is locked in. So he was talking a little bit about how also Lamar was hyping up Tyler Huntley and all these other guys, and essentially Cam said that, look, it's about practice squad players, personnel, the equipment staff, the cafeteria, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody can do it themselves, he said. And about Lamar, he said, quote, he embodies that just real gritty, like, we're about to come whoop your family friendly, whoop your butt. Guys are selling out, and he has that whole Baltimore city in his hand. And it's true, right? Lamar has embraced the city has embraced him. Lamar has essentially become one of the faces of the city, not just from a sports perspective, but when you think about Baltimore, there are plenty of people you think about both in sports and outside of it. but Lamar is certainly one of those. I mean, Adley Rushman's kind of become the face of the Orioles. Lamar's become the face of the Ravens here. And I think those two, you kind of look at, they're the faces of the sports scene. But Lamar has, fallen in love with this city. The city has fallen in love with him. And the city goes as Lamar goes. And I think that's why during his whole contract situation and the contract saga, people were so devastated at the idea of Lamar leaving because there was unfinished business. What did Lamar say right when he was drafted? He walked up on the stage, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, still working the draft in those days. He had that interview, and it was a great interview by Deion, great interview by Coach Prime. And Lamar said, I'm going to bring a Super Bowl back to Baltimore. Believe that. He said the Ravens are going to get everything they have in them and all this. It's an iconic speech. And Lamar said they're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. So I think when that whole thing was going on, it's, Lamar promised the city this, and it wasn't a fault of Lamar. Like, oh, Lamar's a traitor if he leaves. I don't really think that was the conversation that was going on. I know I wasn't having that conversation. It was more of the Ravens have failed around Lamar, and Lamar obviously didn't get the job done. If he leaves and goes somewhere else and he has that success elsewhere, of course, you're happy for the person in Lamar Jackson, but it's almost like, dang, why didn't it happen in Baltimore? Why couldn't it happen in Baltimore? So this is, I think, what people have been working for. And Lamar himself has said, this is for the city. I want to win it for the city, win it for my teammates. And it's a selfless thing for Lamar, where, of course, he wants to be a champion. He wants it for himself. But it's so much more than that for him. He wants it for everybody not named Lamar Jackson, everybody not named him. And that, to me, is what makes Lamar Jackson so easy to root for, in my opinion. And again, it's kind of like the stuff I said about Tom Brady in terms of, well, I didn't like rooting for Tom Brady, and I never really did, right? It was never a time in my fandom when I rooted for Tom Brady, but you had to respect what he did. And for me, I think it's kind of the same thing. You don't have to like and root for Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying it. There aren't a lot of people in Baltimore that like and root for Tom Brady. I think once you went to Tampa, it was a little better. But those Patriot Tom Brady days, everybody hated Tom Brady here in Baltimore, right? But you had to respect him as one of the best quarterbacks of all time, if not the best quarterback of all time. For Lamar, again, don't have to like him. Don't have to like everything he does. And I don't know why you wouldn't, because I think he's, again, a humble person and a great football player. But you got to respect him as somebody who's competitive. And again, one of the best quarterbacks in this league right now, if not maybe the best quarterback in this league. So I'm hopeful for Lamar. I want it so badly for him. I know the city does too. And he wants it so badly for the city. And Zay Flowers sat down on the Pivot podcast, Ryan Clark, and Zay was glowing about Lamar, saying, quote, he's my MVP. That man can do everything. I mean, everything. And with the best of them, he puts it on film week in and week out. He tells me to be me, like who I was in Little League and high school, and just to go play. If we start on the, say, 25 and 3 plays, we're in the red zone. And I'm like, damn, that was fast. But he's confident in us. We're confident in him. So I think that's why we're all clicking so well on offense. And it just embodies everything. Lamar has taken on a leadership role. And I think, earlier on in his career, he was still kind of figuring out how to be an NFL starting quarterback leader. Not that he didn't have it in him, not that he wasn't leading then, but he was still figuring out, all right, what is my path as a leader? And we're seeing it with Todd Monken handing him the keys to this offense, the Ravens surrounding him with weapons. Lamar wants this so badly, and he has, one, played like it, and two, he's acting like it. He's not acting all arrogant and all, oh, well, we're better than everybody else. And, we are the 1 seed and we're this and the AFC is ours and we're winning the Super Bowl. Lamar has that confidence and the Ravens have that confidence, but they understand the task ahead. They understand the road ahead. It's a whole new season now. And that, to me, is what gives me more confidence over that 2019 team. As I've said before, if you're an everyday, you've heard me say it before, but that 2019 team was young. As much as we want to say they were super talented, and they definitely were, not saying they're not, but that was the first year where Lamar had that target at an NFL level on his back, and it was growing and growing. It wasn't even like the expectations were super high before the season, right? Lamar and that Ravens team burst onto the scene, and there were a bunch of questions heading into the season. So I think that, again, not that it excuses how that season ended, but I think it's so different now because of the leadership we've seen Lamar have. Roquan you bring in, the vibes are great, and part of that is Lamar makes the vibes great. Lamar is a selfless individual. He's a respectful guy, but when you go out on that football field and you're facing him, it's game on. It's game mode for him, and he has that killer mentality where he's going to go out there and dice you up. So 3 wins here for the Ravens. Hopefully Baltimore pulls it off, because I really am hopeful that this year is the year for them. We'll have conversations a little more throughout the week about, oh, is it Super Bowl or bust? And how is that whole thing with maybe them losing both coordinators potentially and maybe multiple big time players. But, at this point, you have Lamar, you have a shot. And with the way he's playing, with the way he's locked in, the way he's ready to rewrite that history and kind of put his stamp on this whole thing and hopefully put his name in that book of Super Bowl champions, I'm very optimistic they can get something done this season. Coming up, though, we will talk about the coaching updates across the league here, dive into Monday's news on the coaching carousel, and if anything else developed from an openings perspective, plus a little bit about how Baltimore actually got to this point right now. Stay tuned, plenty to get to on the show. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and with the new year arrived now, there are some things that, of course, I want to keep the same about myself in 2024, but also things that I really want to improve, like definitely my sleep schedule, definitely working on that one day in and day out. It's a grind here, but 100% I love the grind. But around New Year's, we get obsessed with maybe how to change ourselves instead of just expanding what we already are doing, right? Maybe you finally organize one part of your space and you want to tackle another, or maybe you're taking your supplements every morning and now you want to actually eat breakfast too. Therapy helps you find your strengths so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that really stick. And therapy has so many benefits, such as learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries, and can empower you to become the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who experience major trauma. It's for everybody. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Wednesday. As always, thank you so much, whether you're in video form, audio form, for tuning in today and making us your first listen here on Locked On Ravens. It really means a lot. We're trying to grow the show here, and it's been really, really cool to see the growth, video form, audio form, social media, subtext, everything that we've been able to do. The communities have just blown me away, and it's been awesome. So if you want to be a part of the community, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and follow along. You can catch us both in audio form and video forms. If you want to watch one day, then listen another day, you're not going to miss out on anything. If you're on YouTube, also hitting that like button really helps out in the algorithm and putting it in front of more Ravens fans so we can grow this community. Maybe even people who aren't Ravens fans, right? You got a friend who maybe is a Steelers fan and they upset the Bills. You can put them our way on Locked On Ravens. Maybe the Ravens will play the Browns. Joe Flacco comes back. Maybe a Browns fan finds this show. So really appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening and making us your first listen each and every day. But let's talk a little bit about the coaching updates and the coaching carousel. We did an in-depth episode on the coaching carousel with Jake Luke. Actually, we did that yesterday, and the Todd Monken news essentially broke as we were recording. So yeah, get a little live action breaking news in there. If you want to go back, check out that episode. That'd mean a lot. But the Ravens, Todd Monken, Anthony Weaver, Mike McDonald, all getting requested on Monday. Weaver and McDonald by the Commanders, and then Monken was the Panthers and the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. So doesn't surprise me about McDonald or Weaver. Monken, I guess surprise isn't the word I'd use, but I wasn't expecting it, I guess. To me, I think that I would have thought that Monken maybe would have had another year before he got any inquiries. But again, I'm not expecting Monken to get hired this coaching cycle. McDonald's a different story. I could see it happening regardless of how bad it would be for the Ravens organization. It'd definitely be a step back, but they have plenty of other suitable candidates in that building who are working under McDonald right now that could come in and Anthony Weaver maybe, right, for example. But McDonald is somebody that I think deserves it. And Jake and I kind of talked about it yesterday, where it's almost like, well, what's happening today might not be happening tomorrow, right? What's happening this season might not be happening next season. What if the Ravens have a ton of injuries on defense next year? It falls off. McDonald was a super hot candidate this season, but then next offseason is, oh, well, the defense fell off because of injuries or this happened or that happened. So if you're Mike McDonald, I get that the Ravens situation is good. Like, you're in a good situation right now. If you're the Ravens, why would you want to leave? Maybe he has dreams of becoming an NFL head coach. And obviously, as long as John Harbaugh's around, that's not going to be with the Ravens. I'm not expecting Harbaugh to step aside or anything like that. We saw the passion that Jim and his family and John had after Michigan won the national championship. Even if the Ravens win, I don't think there's any, well, Harbaugh's going to ride off into the sunset and, give McDonald the keys. Could happen. It'd be awesome if it did, in terms of, they get to keep Harbaugh and McDonald. But I feel like the Ravens are probably going to lose a coach of theirs to either a head coach or a defensive coordinator opportunity. Offensively, I mean, I guess maybe T. Martin, maybe Willie Taggart. I'm not sure, but I think you're looking more on the defensive side of the ball because Zach Orr has been a very promising guy. Maybe he's the defensive coordinator candidate for a team. So this is what happens with the Ravens every single season, right? And we hear the Commanders want to kind of build the Baltimore model, the Ravens model. Well, I mean, you don't have that. You're not the model for somebody if you're not successful. And we've seen coaches leave left and right and teams kind of pluck coaches left and right from the Ravens organization. That's because they're successful. That's because Baltimore's built a model and they can just recycle. They can pluck guys. They can resurrect coaching careers. It's something they've done their entire franchise history. So you can even talk about a guy like Joe Ortiz, who got interviewed as the director of player personnel for the Giants general manager job last year. There are rumblings he'll get requested for the Commanders. I know that, who was it? Was it Nick Mateo? I can't remember who was it, but someone got requested for the Panthers general manager job, if I'm not mistaken. So Baltimore, it's just a thing with them. It stinks to lose these guys every single season. I'm not guaranteeing anybody's going to leave, but if we're going on FanDuel, our friends over on FanDuel, and we're kind of betting, if I had to bet, I think the Ravens probably will lose one assistant coach. I mean, Baltimore lost coaches last year, right? It was the same thing. Now, there's this weird Wink Martindale situation right now in New York, where at the time of this recording, I don't think he's officially resigned, but there are reports that he did, and then he was going to get fired, but then Dable didn't fire him, and then now he's like home in Florida. The whole thing is really, really weird. I wouldn't expect Wink back in Baltimore, personally. Jake Luke, who, again, we recorded the episode yesterday with, brought up a very interesting conversation about maybe Drew Wilkins or Kevin Wilkins, who Drew Wilkins was the outside linebackers coach who kind of Wink brought through the ranks and everything. So maybe that could be a situation. Well, we'll see. The Ravens, if they lose at McDonald, it's a big blow. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but they've recovered before from this thing. I'm just hoping that they'll kind of keep it. I know we were talking about they need to go external with all these other hires they've had over the past couple of seasons. But I think now you've established a foundation. Go promote Zach Orr. Go promote Anthony Weaver, right? Go promote one of these other guys from within the organization that you've seen the success with. So we'll see what happens. Again, nothing set in stone yet. The Titans ended up moving on from Mike Vrabel. We'll see what they end up doing. I don't know what's going to happen in New England with Bill Belichick. Maybe he's the next Commanders head coach instead of McDonald. I don't know. So we'll see. Craziness. The coaching carousel already in full effect, and the playoffs have not even started yet. But that's what happens with Black Monday and all that other stuff. Quickly, though, let's talk about how Baltimore got here, right? The 1 seed in the bye. There were a lot of expectations on this team. I had them finishing right around 13-4, 14-3. And I was, pretty spot on the money there. I can't remember exactly what my record prediction was, but the Ravens ended up dominating in week 1. They dominated in week 2. They ended up losing in pretty poor fashion in week 3 to the Colts, but then they kind of got things going, right? The Pittsburgh loss in week 5 was awful. The Browns loss was terrible, but 3 real losses on the season. I'm not really counting the Pittsburgh one. 3 real losses, 2 of which they were beaten by themselves, right? I think the Colts game, they beat themselves, and then the Steelers game, they beat themselves. The Browns game, I'll give the Browns credit. They wanted that game more. They out-physicaled Baltimore. They were down, 3 tackles? They're like 4th and 5th string tackles. Baltimore lost that game. The Browns beat the Ravens in that game. But at this point, you have to look at their track record, their body of work, and especially after the bye, where in the 4 big games they played, Rams, Jaguars, 49ers, and Dolphins, they passed A+ flying colors. Not a complaint from me. They got a character win against the Rams. They essentially ended the Jaguars. They were kind of already floundering a little bit. I think the Ravens delivered the knockout punch there. But then Miami and San Francisco, those 2 games, well, I guess it was San Francisco, Miami, but back-to-back, just 2 blowouts of arguably what were, outside of the Ravens, the 2 best teams in the NFL. I think, again, people were kind of viewing it as San Francisco, Baltimore, Miami. And now it's, I think, weirdly enough, it's Baltimore, San Francisco, probably Buffalo at this point, maybe a Dallas. I don't know. I think, again, your clear top 2 teams are Baltimore and San Francisco. But if you're not giving Baltimore that top spot, I mean, I don't really know what you're doing. So 14-3, it could have been, but 13-4, the final record with that Week 18 Pittsburgh loss. But again, Lamar locked in, ready to rewrite that history. And be sure to subscribe here on Locked On Ravens if you want more daily Ravens coverage. Again, 5 days a week here on the show. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. So we have a lot more coming at you. Even during a bye week, we'll talk more about the whole Super Bowl or bust narrative. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, like the video on YouTube, follow along in audio form. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.